I should be up now. I still, man, live streaming has scared the crap out of me ever since I started looking at it, but I just thought it looked really cool and fun, and so I wanted to do it. If you are with me, just do me a favor, say howdy. I'm going to show you some of the stuff I was thinking about talking through in a couple minutes. Hopefully, get a couple people with us so that we could have kind of like a vote about what we wanted to do. But anyway, I'll get better at this over time. And yeah, I've got the chat up. So if anybody writes a message in the chat, either on Facebook or YouTube, that's where we're streaming right now. Just hopefully it'll show up for everybody to see. So we'll see if it all works the way it's supposed to. I've got a screen. Hopefully, I can switch back and forth here where you'll see my face at the bottom, but you'll see the screen I'm looking at. Um, I'm showing you right now my YouTube channel, Plain Spoken, and you'll see that we're doing pretty well on YouTube. I'm pretty happy with what's going on. We have 2,050 subscribers as of yesterday, I think. So we've still put out some content, and everybody's, I think, been watching the interview I did with the gentleman who came out of the ELCA. So if you enjoyed that, I hope you did. I hope I don't know. Let me know how you felt about it. Okay, I'm checking to see that we are live right now, and we are. So, and I'm the only one watching right now. All right. Well, let me show you some of what I was thinking about covering, and I'll go back over it again. But we have the weekly News mailing with several articles in there. So if you're interested at all in what News is talking about, I have not looked at a lot of these yet, or any of these really. And then we've got a press release from the Oklahoma Annual Conference about this special called annual conference they've been compelled into by the state court of Oklahoma. We've got a weekly mailing from Good News Magazine by Tom Lambricht talking about the, what's it called? The Christmas Covenant legislation. We've got a First Things article that I've had pulled up for forever that I'm supposed to read, Baptizing the Status Quo Then and Now. And, well, I don't know how many First Things fans we've got. Then we've got the most recent Firebrand, A Gospel of Power, reclaiming pastoral identity for clergy leaving the United Methodist Church, followed by A Test of Friendship, a historian's reflection on the recent General Assembly of the Church of the Nazarenes. So that's one of the denominations I've been thinking about checking out and reporting on a little bit as we're trying to figure out what's to be done in the future of Wesleyanism. Next is the convening annual conference of 2023 for the South Georgia Provisional Annual Conference. I don't know that there's much to read there, but I just noticed it was up, and I think it's scheduled for the end of this month. And I looked all over this. I couldn't figure out if it's going to be live streamed or not. I'm probably not going to drive down there to be part of it, but I thought it sure would be interesting to watch it and see. I mean, heck, they got Bishop Jones, Carolyn Moore, David Watson, Tesha Mallory. I always thought it was Tezia Tesha. I listened to a really good interview she did on the, what's that podcast called? The Spirit and Truth guys up in Dayton, Ohio. They did a really good interview with her. She has an interesting story. So anyway, I'm just interested to see how different this looks from United Methodist gatherings. Everybody keeps saying it's not a UMC 2.0 thing, but okay, great. We have 4 people watching. We got more people signing on after. There were like 30 people on the original stream, and I botched it. I felt terrible about that. So anyway, yeah, go ahead and sign in the chat. Let me know you're with me. We'll decide what we're doing here in a minute. Then I thought it'd be good just to check in, look at some of these stats on disaffiliation, and then this is my spreadsheet that I've done on that. I'll make it a little bit bigger, but if I just thought it'd be good to have that up in case we talk through anything on that. Wanted to do some self-promotion because I like the project that we're a part of and I want it to do well. This is a spreadsheet that I started with YouTube channels going from, this is the number of subscribers. And so I started off once upon a time down here. I remember when I hit 1,000, and now we are at 2.05 thousand subscribers, growing steadily. I'm pretty happy with how we're doing. Just want to promote some of the other stuff that I'm doing. I've got a Substack. This is at jeffreyrickman.substack.com if you want to see stuff that I'm writing, what's on my mind. A lot of it's United Methodist or Global Methodist related, but a lot of it's not. Mostly talking about church culture and practical theology. Then, there's the there's our Facebook page, and there's my failed live stream a little bit ago. But for some reason, Facebook isn't doing nearly as well as YouTube. I don't know why. We've only got 469 followers. That's not even as big as my church, and I have a small little church. But YouTube's doing quite well. So I just want to thank everybody for the support on YouTube. Oh, yeah, that should not be there anymore. Those live streams did not do well. But that's where we are right now, and that's great. So, let's go back to my home, your channel. So, if you haven't seen the interview I did with the guy from the ELCA, that was good. And then TJ and I closed out the third part of our series on Eastern Pennsylvania, which I thought that was really good. That was really helpful for me to do to get my thoughts straight. I think a lot of people like seeing those clips from annual conference. So if that's something you enjoyed, you're welcome. All right. Nobody is writing anything in the chat, but we're up to 8 people. Do you guys have any thoughts about which thing we should read? Should we just go through the News articles? Should we read the thing from Oklahoma Annual Conference? Should we do the thing by Tom Lambrecht? I'll just wait for a second, watch the comments, and if nobody says anything, I'm just going to start from the left and go right. So, I'll just in silence here kind of review what some of these articles are about. Oh, hey, Ed. Although your Facebook page may not have many followers, your material is cross-posted on many other pages. And I want to say thank you for that. I don't even know how to say your last name, Rodarmal. Ed has a great thing that he's been doing, Omnia Methodist, for some time. He has a website and a Facebook presence, and he's on Twitter, and he posts a lot of my material. So, Edward, thank you so much for the cross-pollination you offer, and I hope I can return the favor sometime. I hope by me calling you out right now, I hope that helps you out a little bit. I don't see any other stuff right now, and for some reason the chat's not working, so I'm just going to turn that off. Okay, are we ready to dive into some reading? Okay, let's just look at the weekly send out from News. We have, these are regular installments in News. There are natural disasters, and the United Methodist Church is active in addressing them. I've never gotten a lot out of those, and I don't know why. Well, I think it's because they don't talk about Jesus a lot in them. They just talk about individuals on the ground and how they're affected and how we're helping. We have worship in Angola. I don't know much about Angola, and I'm not in the mood to learn right now, so I'm going to keep going. From the West Virginia Annual Conference, church helps seniors avoid loneliness. That's kind of interesting. From the Creation Justice Movement, conferences pass environmental resolutions. That sounds like something that would easily get me talking for the rest of the episode about environmentalism. I used to be a pretty run-of-the-mill environmentalist. I actually was on the nonprofit Arkansas Earth Day when I lived in Little Rock for a bit, and was an organizer for that annual event, but no more. It's not that I'm against environmentalism. I think to be a conservative, you want to conserve things and keep them how they are. It's just I disagree with how a lot of the left does environmentalism. So anyway, new 2023 annual conference reports posted. I'm going to bring that up just so I remember to look at it later. Is it summaries? Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay, so Alabama, West Florida. Pull that up. Oh, yeah, and it has summaries of what happened. Well, I think that's too into the weeds for today, but I'm going to keep that open just for later. Greater New Jersey Conference, Teens Learn, Live Lessons of Giving. That sounds maybe okay. Press releases with Westpath, the Sustainable Investment Report is released. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in that. I'm going to open that up too. And then we have events. Then we have top stories from the week. Bishop Devidar, who led with kindness, dies. Oh, I hadn't heard that actually. Sudarshana Devadhar. The only conference I know that they served was in Greater New Jersey. I might pull up the obituary. Church sees signs of renewal even as exits rise. Okay, this is a story that I know has gotten some traction, so I'm going to open that up real quick. Summer camp caters to people with disabilities. Okay, that's in Pennsylvania. Our Living World land. Okay, from this. What's that about? How does it end? Everything around us is made from the natural resources of the land, the houses we live in, the food we eat, the components of the technology we use, the choices we make in the use of land for producing food. Okay. The Creator calls human beings to care for the land for its own sake and for the sake of all life forms. Okay, that sounds unremarkable. Couple lives in church parking lot in the Holston Conference. That sounds sad. All right, I opened up the ones that kind of interest me. And Ed is still the only person who has commented, and we're still only at 8 people. Man, I wish I could have held on to those original 25. All right, let's look at this release from Westpath and see if it's interesting at all. In Glenview, Illinois, Westpath Benefits and Investment, that's where a lot of United Methodist and Global Methodist churches are invested with retirement programs, endowments, where we put our money. Today released its Sustainable Investment Report. The report details Westpath's approach to sustainable investment, shares highlights from the past 2 years, and reviews the performance of the agency's investment strategies focused on environmental and social opportunities. I went back and forth with their number 2 a couple months ago. I want to say his last name's Zellner. It's called ESG investing, environmental social governance. And this is something that actually Westpath was way in the lead of in comparison to the others that do it, Vanguard, State Street, BlackRock. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running for Republican president, he has started anti-ESG investment firms. He says ESG is woke corporate conduct. They're trying to engage in social engineering through it. And that's something that Westpath has said at the outset. They are trying to change the world through their investment strategies. They don't invest in anything dealing with gambling, tobacco, alcohol, anything that's, I don't think they invest with oil, or some of their funds do, some of them don't. What was the big one? Oh, arms, artillery, weaponry. And then when they do invest in oil, they're trying to sit on the boards and advocate for them to change their environmental policies. So they've just reported on that. Has anything changed? Quote, we produce these reports every 2 years, and the process always prompts us to pause and reflect on how Westpath has influenced a more sustainable economy in the recent past. Westpath General Secretary and CEO Andy Hendren said in the report, quote, each time a sustainable investment report is published, I'm heartened by how our sustainable investing approach supports our mission to care for those who serve. Okay, let's look at some report highlights. Since inception, performance of Westpath's low-carbon solution strategies, including the transition-ready portfolio strategies it co-created with BlackRock, the world's largest asset manager. If you don't know why I said that about BlackRock, there are just a few huge investment firms that are exercising huge control over the global economy and really limiting. Well, anyway, I don't know that I want to finish that sentence. Recent investments in affordable housing opportunities made through the Positive Social Purpose Lending Program, as well as the since inception performance of the program. Co-leadership of the Investors for Opioid and Pharmaceutical Accountability, a coalition that engages pharmaceutical companies involved in the opioid business. That sounds interesting. I hadn't heard of that. Engagements focused on improving working conditions and worker safety with industry-leading meat processors and the dollar store industry. I've never heard of that either. Collaboration with fellow United Methodist agencies on a shared commitment to achieve net zero emissions. There it is. That's a huge part of ESG. Main thing, the reason that you should care about that is out of concern for the poor. And this is something that I've heard, what's the iPatch, Texas legislator's name? I listen to his podcast all the time. Anyway, he has a guy on there, a European fella, talks about the practical implications of net zero policies. It makes energy production so much more expensive, and the people that actually are affected the most are poor people who cannot afford soaring prices as we go to more expensive forms of energy production. So that's actually, it might be something that we pat ourselves on the back about because we're not hurting the environment as much. Well, that's even arguable, but it really hurts the poor. It's not really very good. And then the last one is action by WestPath's employee-led green team and DEI. DEI is diversity, equity, inclusion. That's woke leftist social agenda stuff. Council to promote environmental, sustainability, and diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Okay, so all this stuff signals pretty clearly WestPath is leaning left in its social priorities. Dan Crenshaw, thank you so much. Yes, Dan Crenshaw. Well, remind me the name of the guy he always has on there that talks about forward-thinking innovation being the answer to environmental issues rather than net zero stuff. So my brain apparently isn't working today. I got so flustered about that stinking live stream not working out. I got to figure out what to do there. All right, so this is Bishop Devidar. I know I'm probably butchering his last name, who led with kindness, dies. So let's see if we can't honor his memory. Bishop Sudarshana Devadar's last name means follower of God. Through his faithful discipleship and humble leadership, fellow United Methodists say the aptly named bishop helped them to more closely follow God. His sudden passing on July 18th at the age of 72 has led to an outpouring of grief from people across the United Methodist connection. He is survived by his wife, Prema, and their daughter, Trina, son-in-law, Gage, and his grandchildren. The denomination's first Indian-American bishop, whom friends called Suda, had just retired on January 1st. Yeah, I thought that was a new thing. After nearly 20 years as an active bishop, first in the Greater New Jersey Conference in 2004 to 2012, and then in the New England Conference until this year, he had moved to Cincinnati, Ohio to be near his grandchildren. But he was still serving as chair of the denomination's Asian American Language Ministry Plan, which works to develop new United Methodist ministries and strengthen existing ones among more than a dozen language groups. Okay? He was a servant leader who possessed a gentle heart, a deep and abiding faith, and rigorous intellect, said Bishop Latrell Miller Easterling. She's Baltimore, Washington bishop. In a statement from the Council of Bishops, she and other members of the bishop's executive committee were in Chicago when they received the news. Easterling, who leads the Baltimore, Washington, and Peninsula Delaware conferences, served on Devidar's cabinet before being elected bishop. She is also the current president of the Northeastern Jurisdiction College of Bishops. He led ecumenically, understanding that we all benefit from God's design of unity, Easterling said. So that must be him. I assume that's his wife. That's Bishop Warner Brown. That's, that's that bishop from the DRC. What is his name? Fellow bishops, probably was down here. Nope, Nakula Natanda Natambo. Okay, yeah, I don't have to summon that. Fellow bishops in the denomination's northeastern jurisdiction who served alongside Davidhar also discussed the impact of his ministry, including the Council of Bishops, President Thomas J. Bickerton. Suda's heart was as genuine and as pure as any person I've ever met, said Bickerton, who also leads the New York conference. His favorite phrases were, by the grace of God and in the spirit of the covenant. That's a good thing. They were true descriptors of his incredible life. Davidhar was a pioneer in serving in cross-racial appointments and a champion of ethnic diversity and inclusion across the denomination. All right. What about Taizé? Throughout his ministry, he also supported the denomination's work for Christian unity and interreligious dialogue. He was part of the United Methodist delegation at the World Council of Churches General Assembly last year. So that's one of the United Methodist Church's general budget items. From annual taking young people to the Taizé community in France, to leading an interreligious study trip to India, to facilitating the bishop's leadership team for ecumenical and interreligious relationships, he was a true leader, said Reverend Gene Hawkshurst. Okay, so you can read more about it. Sounds like there's a lot more. Okay, what does it say about LGBTQ times? Intense times he made time for prayer. After a particularly emotional Council of Bishops meeting, he spent a quiet moment praying with LGBTQ activists who had unexpectedly shown up. He also paid for the activists' lunch. In the denomination's debate over the status of LGBTQ people, he made clear he stood for full inclusion, but he was always willing to extend a hand to people across the theological spectrum. Okay, so that's where he was, and may he rest in peace. Let's move on. Church sees signs of renewal even as exits rise. All right, Heather Hahn wrote this. She's one of the primary authors. All right, let's see how we spin this. For many United Methodists in the U.S., the familiar annual conference opening hymn, And Are We Yet Alive, carried special resonance this year. The denomination's regional bodies had just come through another grueling season of approving church departures in the U.S., dedicated United Methodists had good reason to sing Charles Wesley words with gusto that they could still see each other's face and join together in praising Jesus for, quote, his redeeming grace. As other mainline Protestant denominations in the U.S. have done previously, the United Methodist Church is experiencing its own separation after decades of internal strife over the role of LGBTQ people in church life. All right, so we have a graph, regional distribution of churches. Okay, and it shows what percentage disaffiliating churches by, okay, which jurisdictions are, okay, so blue is what size they are in comparison to each other. So when you add up all the blues, it should come to 100%. When you add up all the oranges, it should come to 100%. It's making clear the southeastern jurisdiction is overrepresented and the south central jurisdiction is overrepresented in disaffiliating churches. So if you're bigoted against Southern people, then that's real easy for you to digest. But against the sadness of goodbyes, many U.S. annual conference meeting in May and June welcomed new United Methodist faith communities and celebrated a renewed commitment to sharing the good news of Christ's grace outside church walls. So, okay, quote, the people who are in the room are the people who want to be United Methodist, said the Council of Bishops President Thomas J. Bickerton, who also leads the New York conference. Quote, they want to reclaim a sense of purpose. And so right alongside of lament and grief is hopefulness and joy. First off, that is a terrible assumption to make. A better assumption would be that a lot of them just couldn't afford to get out or didn't have pastors that would let them have the conversation or just had their heads stuck in the sand. To assume that everybody still in the UMC still wants to be there is a big mistake. As of the end of June, a United Methodist News Review has found that the U.S. annual conferences had approved the exit of 6,181 churches with property. That translates to about 20% of U.S. congregations, or 1 in 5, withdrawing since a church law allowing disaffiliations took effect 4 years ago. So that's 1 in 5, 20%. Okay. Multiple annual conferences have scheduled or tentatively planned to hold more special sessions to consider disaffiliation resolutions before the church law expires at year's end. I think I have that open on my browser somewhere else. Yeah, I think I have it right here. I'm going to drag that up. This is the list of all the special called conferences. You'll see most of them are already passed and gone. So Virginia has October 7th. Upper New York has October 14th. Florida has August 5th and December 2nd. Holston, September 7th. They had a huge number leave, didn't they? I've got that open here. Holston. Yeah, 264 left out of how many? There's Holston. Out of 852, yeah. So they had a 30% decline. I wonder how many more are leaving. Anyway, I got too far off course. Let's go back. Multiple annual conferences are scheduled, but for now, about 80% of the U.S. Methodist congregations, United Methodist congregations, or 8 in 10, remain in the denomination, and many longtime church observers see reason to hope that the tide of disaffiliation is starting to ebb. I saw a thing by Dan Dalton saying that even though 20% of the churches are leaving, like 70% of the money is now leaving. I don't know where he got that number. I have not reported that on my own. But that really, I would be curious to know how much of the money is leaving, because it's not going to track one-to-one with how many churches are leaving. So just depends on how many disproportionately wealthier churches are leaving. I don't know that anybody's done that study. You know, the Lewis Center for Church Leadership has the resources for doing that study, but they would rather make insinuations about bigoted Trump voters being the main ones wanting to leave. It's also not yet known how much membership loss the disaffiliations represent. That's in large part because a number of members of exiting congregations are opting to remain United Methodist by transferring to other churches and helping them to grow, or planting new United Methodist faith communities. And it has links there. I wonder how substantiated that is. So growth for some churches staying United Methodist is that article. And I wonder, does it have any stats in there? I don't have time for that. And then planting new United Methodist faith communities. That's the other. Trying to heal after church disaffiliation votes. Well, if you want to read more about that, those are the links you can follow. Jesus likened his disciples to vine branches that need trimming to flourish, and many United Methodists also see the potential that the current pruning of anger and infighting will enable the church to bear more fruit. Lifelong United Methodist Pat Luna said she left the Alabama-West Florida annual conference feeling encouraged. Alabama-West Florida, they lost a lot too, didn't they? She left. Okay, so they had 533 churches. They lost 200. Yeah, they're down almost half their size. And she felt encouraged. That's interesting. Okay, we're back here. The people who are staying in the UMC are excited and fired up and ready to move towards the future where we believe God is leading us, said Luna, one of the lay people leading grassroots efforts to promote the UMC. The Reverend Kim Goddard told the Holston Annual Conference that she and other district superintendents who have been on the front lines of administering disaffiliation votes have shifted their conversation to a new D word. Not disaffiliation, she said. The word is discipleship. This is one of my bailiwicks. The UMC never even was sure what it meant by discipleship, or what a disciple is, or who Jesus is. I don't even know what she means by that. The district superintendents are not alone in that shift. I asked people, how do you feel about this annual conference, and how's it going? Goddard told the News. There were several who said, feels just like a revival. I have the hardest time believing that. I would be very interested. I just can't. Maybe. Still, she acknowledged that getting to this point has been at times heartbreaking and has involved a lot of prayer. The tumultuous 2019 Special Generals Conference, which by a relatively narrow vote strengthened the denomination's bans on Same-sex weddings and non-celibate gay clergy also added the church law that allows the U.S. congregations to leave the denomination with property if they meet certain financial and procedural conditions. What is it linked to there? Conferences diverge in handle. Okay, so it talks about how some conferences made it easy and some did not. All right, so I think I have too many open. For the most part, the United Methodist churches and individuals who oppose those bans have chosen to remain in the United Methodist fold. I don't know if this is going to say anything that interests me from here on out. It's a lot more words. Yeah, it just does a summary of different conferences, I guess. I'll put the link to this up if anybody wants to read it, but I think I'm done reading this. And then this was written in 2022. That's a full year ago, talking about how different conferences are handling 2023. There's been a lot of developments since then. I don't know that I would want to read that article. All right, this was the story about the people sleeping in the parking lot. A couple lives in a church parking lot. I'm reading a comment from Gabe. I'm from a church that left the Holston Conference, and people are guessing maybe 100 more, but majority that left were from rural counties. My church was only one that left in Knoxville. Okay, so most of the urban churches have stayed. See, I would love breakdowns like this. That's interesting. Okay. I don't know that I want to read this one. Well, I want to know why they're living in a parking lot, though. Why would you do such a thing? Do they have to? The gray car has been parked at Cedar Lane UMC since March, to be specific, since 2 weeks before Easter, says the pastor. The car's engine doesn't work and hasn't since 2 young passengers and their dog coasted into a church parking lot 4 months ago. The car was their shelter, their home, and there was nowhere else to go. So for the last 16 weeks, Camera and Seth, ages 25 and 23, and their dog Apollo have been living in a church parking lot. They've been sleeping under the steeple at that church. We had to think it through. We realized, why did they not help these people? We realized this was a safe harbor for them, said the Reverend Richard Richter, Cedar Lane pastor. If they had broken down in some other place, they could have been in danger. Camera and Seth have not had permanent housing for months, unable to find rentals they could afford with minimum wage jobs or to accelerate through agency waiting lists to get aid. They've lived in a friend's house, weekly hotels, or their car, moving from place to place. They were on their way to another church, Fountain City UMC, to get food from its blessing box when their car crapped out next to Cedar Lane. The next morning, a church member came to the couple's crowded car to ask if they were okay. Then the pastor came by. Richard has been super kind and very helpful and has made sure we're okay. Sometimes he gets us to laugh so we don't think, oh, that's how you can minister to people. Get them to laugh so we don't have to think as much about the situation we're in. While admitting, quote, we never dreamed it would be this long, Richter said he couldn't dismiss from church property the young ed. This is seriously what it sounds like. They're saying the church is doing its mission work with the poor by letting them live in a car in the parking lot. I'm not inferring that they should kick them out of the parking lot. I'm saying that if poor people are in this close proximity to the church, you're morally obligated to get them housing and on their feet. What are you doing? Quote, I just celebrated 36 years in ministry, and this is the first time I've stuck my neck out to this extent, Richter said. At first, they stuck to themselves, trying to be self-sufficient and to work through it. It would have been easy to just have them towed out of the parking lot. Yeah, you could have been really mean, and the fact that you aren't sure makes you sound nice. But that's not what we're called to do. So Richter and a few church members got busy. One church member, a master mechanic, okay, this is good, looked at the car engine and declared it to be unrepairable. Oh, okay. He then towed the car to a shady spot in the parking lot. The church couldn't invite Kemmerer and Seth to stay inside the building because of the child care minute. Yeah, you don't want those poor people around the children. But Richter was able to store some of their belongings inside. Okay, that's good, and allow them to use electricity, the restroom, and Wi-Fi. Richter, his family, and church members delivered meals to their okay, good, every day, and invited them to worship and church activities. Quote, the next day after we got here, they offered to buy us food from a food truck that was coming. I'll always remember it because it was called Rasta Pasta, and it was the best pasta I ever ate, Seth said. We went to a few services, Camera said. We wanted to see what it was like, and we thought it was the least we could do. Yeah, they're doing us a service by coming to worship, right? The worship also did their laundry using the child care's washer and dryer. He took them to the YMCA where his wife works and where he leads exercise classes to take showers. Okay, so they did more than just let them live in their parking lot. This is not nothing. Richter got even more deeply involved. He took the young parents each Thursday to visit with their baby daughter, who was born last November and immediately placed with a foster family by the Department of Children's Services. This is a sad story. He spent hours on the phone and drove the couple all over town to help them jump through hoops to get on lists for housing and food aid and to take parenting classes and other steps to eventually gain custody of their daughter. Okay, all right. So he's doing a lot for him. I wish he'd started on this. I regret the tone I had first. I've been through those poverty simulation activities, but it's nothing like living with people who are actually going through it, the pastor said. It's incredible to see the runaround they get. You don't have a car, but you're supposed to be here and there. You're supposed to get a job, but then they schedule classes and meetings or want forms filled out when you got to be at work. Dude, it really is like that. It's really frustrating. It's really hard to be poor and not have any social safety net. The gray car and its residents who sleep in the car or sit in shaded doorway of the church with their dog when they're not working are visible from the highway. People yell, "Get a job," from the road or call the police to complain about them, Seth says. People don't act that way here. They act like that over in Tennessee. That's where Holston Conference is, right? Richter described a stormy night when he dropped by the church to check on a laundry load. A police officer was shining a light inside the car, and the kids were crying and trying to pack, believing the pastor had betrayed them. Richter interceded and discovered that someone had called the police claiming to be the pastor who wanted camera and Seth removed from the parking lot. In the end, the police officer apologized and shook the couple's hands. What do you want to bet that's someone from the church who just has a hard heart that called the police? I didn't learn this in seminary, Richter said. I didn't learn how to deal with homeless young adults in my parking lot. I didn't learn how to talk to the police. Well, let me tell you, a lot of people don't. I mean, nobody knows how to do this stuff perfectly. I worked with the homeless on the streets of Little Rock for a year, and then when I lived in Boston, I tried to minister to some homeless people, and then here and there in ministry over the years in Idaho and here, people living in these dysfunctional situations are notoriously hard to help. It's very difficult to do this. And, they're feeding them meals, taking them to get the services that they need, giving them a safe place to gather. Yeah, I mean, what else can you do? You're inviting them into the religious community. Some neighbors are kind when they inquire about the church's residents, even sending food or toiletries their way. In every confrontation, Richter insists the goal is to help the couple get out of the parking lot as soon as possible, but into a better situation. Yeah, that's a good goal. What would you do with people who are in your care? He says to people who ask why his church is hosting a homeless family. They're like tomato plants, and we're like the stake that's supporting them. We want to protect them and help them grow. Gabe says, why not take them in? This is embarrassing. Well, yeah, so ideally, there are people in the church that can take people like this into their homes. But when you're talking about, okay, two young people got a car that doesn't work, they got a daughter that was taken from them. I mean, they're not saying anything about it, but I assume substance abuse issues. I assume some mental illness or super low IQ. A lot of people like this, if you bring them into your home, they're going to be really hard. So yeah, ideally the church has a place to put them. That's one thing I haven't understood. There are places in like urban areas where they'll have like villages of miniature homes where you can put people like this and help them get back on their feet. There are a lot of churches that could afford to do that and they don't. That's something I'm hoping to do here at the Nowata Church. We already have the land and I'd like to think we have enough money to build it, but finding people to lead such a ministry. Yeah, that's the thing that's really taxing is just having the personal time and energy for dealing with people who just, it's like they barely even know how to tie their shoes or like, well, to use a metaphor, it's like they've learned to tie their shoes wrong and you want to teach them how to tie their shoes right, but they're like, no, this works for me. And you're going, no, it's not working for you, man. And then when they refuse your help on your terms, does that mean, well, you didn't do everything the way I thought you should, so get out of here? No, that doesn't seem right either. So there's like this bearing with each other, but they're not in the Christian community, so there has to be a limit to that, but I don't know what it is. This is a really hard thing. Camera has been working at a nearby dollar store. Seth has been helping at the church's food pantry and doing odd jobs. This week, the couple finally got good news. A teacher in their parenting class was able to expedite the request for housing assistance in Oak Ridge, a city northwest of Knoxville. They're 158th on the housing waiting list. Yikes. On July 14th, Camera, Seth, and Apollo are planning to move out of the parking lot and into an apartment. Camera's dollar store will transfer her employment to Oak Ridge store within walking distance. Seth says they've arranged to sell their Chevy Cruze for $400. I don't know if those, what did it say how much? I wonder if that money adds up. How much more? Okay, we don't have much longer. A few weeks ago, Richter and his wife told the couple in one of his many dad talks, quote, if you just want us to patch you up and get you out of the parking lot, we'll do that. But if you want us to help you raise your child, we will. We want to stand with you. So the only thing I actually see wrong with this is not enough talk about Jesus, or from what I can tell, no talk about Jesus. I don't know if it's the author that's just not talking about it, but when you're dealing with people in need like this, have the conversation in these dad talks. Are they talking about Jesus at all? Because, I mean, the point of the church is not just community for the sake of it, but covenant community around the person and work of Christ Jesus. But United Methodist articles don't really talk about that. Richter plans to reach out to UMC churches in Oak Ridge to see if they can help. Richter's wife, Donna Richter, a mentor who works with families coming out of poverty, is on board to help too. See, that's one of the great things about denominationalism is if you're part of the same covenant denominational body, you can call and go, hey, man, I've been taking care of these people. Can you help me? I hope the GMC is good about that too. The members of Cedar Lane are weary just as Camera and Seth are, while happy for the couple's next step, Richter said. No church is perfect, but we've been allowed to love and guide and protect these people, and it hasn't turned into a fight, and that's a miracle, he said. I've seen people in this church go from transactional ministry to transformational ministry. That's so like, we'll do for you if you do for us. Rather, he's saying, we're doing for you so that Christ will transform us. Seth and Camera hope to welcome their baby daughter home for the first time by the end of summer. Their second child is due in November, and I guess that's them right there. Well, Lord bless Seth and Camera. Father, I don't know what they need, but you do. Give it to them and help them come into right relationship with you. Well, that was a decent article. We need to think through how it is that we care for the poor, so I don't think that was time wasted. I wanted to cut this off at 5, so let's spend the last little bit on developments in my conference. This is the Oklahoma Conference of the United Methodist Church. If you didn't see it earlier this week, I want to say on Monday, maybe it's on Friday, I don't know when I did it. I reported on a court case that took place between First United Methodist Oklahoma City and the conference. The judge surprisingly got involved and mandated that the conference honor a vote that they took outside. Well, you'll hear about it here in a second. That they allow them to come before the conference for a ratification vote, and that they put together a special called conference before August 6th, giving them 20 days to do it, and they're doing it. I thought they were going to refuse and just appeal the case, but they're doing it. So here's the publication that they sent out to the conference to save face and update them on what's going on. So, members of the conference, we want to share an update on the lawsuit which was filed by First UMC in Oklahoma City against the annual conference board of trustees, Bishop Nunn, and Reverend Dr. Victor McCullough. He was the DS. On Monday, District Judge Alatia Haynes Timmons issued a 3-part ruling. First part, Oklahoma Annual Conference cannot proceed with the viability study of First UMC. So they put off so they started the viability study and then didn't answer emails and kicked the can down the road for 2.5 months until the church filed against them. So they're acting like they want to proceed with the viability study, but when the ball was in their court, they didn't proceed with it. So the court, yes, did say, hey, forget the viability study, just give them the vote. 2, an informational meeting that First United Methodist called without the district superintendent's approval or knowledge on February 5th for the stated purpose of conducting a straw poll and presided over by a church member will count as their church conference vote for disaffiliation. No further meeting is required by the district judge. What they've conveniently leave out is they did schedule a properly called church vote, which then 5 days before the superintendent sent them an email at 10:30 in the evening saying, actually, we're going to reschedule so that you will do this viability study. They didn't reschedule it. They just indefinitely put it off. So that's why this was needed. And 3, we are ordered to hold a special annual conference session before August 7th to allow, I thought it was the 6th, but whatever, to allow First United Methodist Church's disaffiliation request to be considered by members of the conference, including the 55 churches, clergy, and lay members who were disaffiliated in April. See, that's the crazy part, that she mandated that those who are already gone and out of the covenant body still have voice and vote. I just couldn't believe that was on the table, but she mandated, and they are going to comply with it. The legal team for the conference is currently going through the process of appealing the ruling. We believe the ruling blatantly interferes with what is and should be an internal church process protected under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment of the United States Congregation. The district court has no right to intervene in the internal affairs of a religious entity, and this unwarranted and erroneous decision represents a threat to all institutions of faith within the state of Oklahoma. There is a world in which that language might be justified. It would be a lot easier to swallow it if they weren't so obviously like in the wrong. In the case with FUMC Oklahoma City, like they were clearly in bad faith. I was on the phone with a lawyer actually yesterday who had seen my commentary on this, and he said that there's this long-standing precedent called ecclesiastical abstention doctrine, which means that they are protected against the state ruling on matters like this, except in cases of fraud. And I said, well, they didn't bring up the word fraud in the court proceedings. And he said, well, sometimes that's just for institutions to save face. But if a judge steps in and orders for them to do things differently, it's because the standards of fraud have been met. And so that's something where if we look at things that way, it really is quite scandalous to the Oklahoma Annual Conference. They misbehaved so badly, so overtly, that under the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment of the United States Constitution, they are still not protected because they have been guilty of a fraud, essentially. So I'm not saying that's what the judge said. I'm not quoting. I'm just saying that if it stands, if the case stands, if the order stands, an appellate court judge will consider this, will consider all the elements. But if it's upheld in the end, then that is essentially saying that the annual conference is guilty of fraud. In addition, well, and what would justify that is if they did all this to gain a building, which it seems like they did. All right, so in addition, the ruling also directs the Oklahoma Annual Conference to conduct its meetings in a manner that is contrary to the UMC's governing law and constitution. This ruling takes away the rights of 365 local churches and the thousands of members of this annual conference to live out their faith as they see fit through the self-governance of their denomination by faithful believers. So I wonder if the judge looked at this, if she would be interpreting them as telling the body how to vote. This is a very hostile reaction to the state interfering and saying, hey, you misbehaved, rather than having humility. The conference is saying, no, they're wrong, and not only have they harmed us, by extension, they're harming you. You know, like Fauci said, if you insult him, you're insulting science. Well, if you're insulting the bishop and his staff, well, you're insulting all 365 members, local churches of the annual conference. Because of the very short timeline we are laboring under, we will have to plan for this annual conference even as the ruling is pending appeal, so that you can prepare yourselves. If you're a member of the conference, we are looking at August 4th or 5th dates for this meeting. The session will take place at the Kirkpatrick Auditorium of the campus of Oklahoma City University. The only business to be conducted shall be the court-ordered consideration of FUMC's disaffiliation request. Registration shall be in person, and photo identification will be required. So Oklahoma is not the biggest state, but it's a big state, and we're all supposed to get over to Oklahoma City there on the day of, and they're going to process us in and take the vote. We have created a web page with a video message from Bishop Nunn. Oh, that's interesting. We don't have time for that. Hey, thanks for the money, Gabe. I appreciate you, buddy. All right, I want to check out this video. I haven't watched it. Maybe this can be the last thing we do. It's 4 minutes. Okay, I'm going to do it. Oh, no, come on. You're going to give me an error message? Ah, man, I really want to know what he said. Well, whatever. Okay. Let us continue to be in prayer for the pastor at FUMC, as well as conference leadership and all of our lay and clergy leaders across this great conference. God's richest blessings, some of the conference staff. All right. Well, we didn't make it through a number of other things, and that's okay. But I would encourage you. Oh, I read this Lambrecht's article. They pasted the text into a WhatsApp thread I'm a part of with some African United Methodists. So that's decent, and that explains why the Christmas Covenant is racist and why anyone who's not racist will vote against the Christmas Covenant next year at General Conference. Looks like there's some good stuff to read in Firebrand. And was there anything else I wanted to plug? Looks like not. So I'll do this again next week. I will get better at this. I won't botch. Well, I might botch it again next week, but definitely not the week after. I get better at things generally. Appreciate all the support. I enjoy doing this stuff and having other people be a part of the conversation. Even if we haven't had a lot of people comment. Oh, and I didn't read some other comments from Gabe. A man from our church, Ben Greenwell, sadly deceased, took in 4 homeless kids. They came to his funeral and see him as family. Oh, well, of course they do. What? God bless. What was his name? You said it. Ben Greenwell. What a wonderful man. Ended better than it started. Of course. Yeah. That's. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to conclude today. If you have articles you want me to consider doing next Friday, I'm just going to do this from 4 to 5 every Friday, try and digest some of this stuff. I get overwhelmed with how much there is to read. I assume you do too. So consider joining me next Friday. If you haven't already, subscribe to me wherever you're watching, and pray about how it is that you can support Plain Spoken. If I haven't said it so that you understand it yet, my agenda is restoring something that resembles historical Wesleyan Methodism, a much more rigorous and disciplined faith that is bound together by a more coherent sense of what it means to like be Methodist and walk in the footsteps of John Wesley and those first generations of Methodists. So if that's a project you are also passionate about, then I would just urge you, stick with me. We'll try and build something up together and hopefully be a good influence on all the Christian world. I don't know how big an influence we can be, but might as well try and be a good influence while we're here, huh? All right, well, I'm going to cut off the live stream now. Thanks for bearing with me. I'll see you next week.